So on the panel, we have someone who I think is even more paranoid than I am, which is Sal. And Sal is an absolute expert when it comes to hardware and security. So I'm excited to hear her views. We also have probably the person that is earliest to actually testing out a lot of these AI tools. When ChatGPT first came out, Matt, you were one of the first people that I spoke to who was actually there in a company using it for real in production. And you've done that ever since for the past 3 years. So you have unbelievable perspective here because you've actually been doing it. And there's not that many people that have at scale inside organizations for that long. So excited to hear from you. And then we also have Chaamini. And Chaamini is actually on the coalface speaking to customers day in, day out about these topics. And so she's going to bring this amazing broad set of context around AI and security. So welcome, panelists. Thank you for joining. So we're going to talk a little about how we keep up with AI and what it means in terms of challenges for security and identity teams. So I'll start with you, Sal. Would you mind just, well, all of you, but Sal, if you could go first. Who are you? What do you work on? And what does identity mean to you in the age of AI?
Hi, I'm Sal. I basically just come out of the woodwork whenever I want something fixed in the kernel upstream. And workload identity for me means binding all of your permissions to a specific moment in time in runtime.
Yeah, I'll go next. So I'm Chaamini Mangaleswaran. So I'm a sales engineer at WSO2. So for the people who doesn't know, WSO2 is an open source software which focuses on identity and access management and API management. And we do have a couple of other products as well. So for me, agent identity means how you give an identity to your agent, regardless it's not a human machine, but it's a unique identity that you give, which is short-lived, and how you govern that. So that's altogether the agent identity. Yeah.
Thank you, Chaamini. Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt Jarvis. I'm Director of Applied AI at a cybersecurity company called Snyk. So I spend all of my time looking at how we transform our business using AI. And I guess workload identity becomes really important for us in terms of traceability and auditability as the more automated we get with agentic flows. You know, we really need to be able to understand exactly what's doing what.
Absolutely. I just remembered there was a picture of you earlier I saw.
There was.
Yeah, you haven't aged at all since then. So just following up on that, Matt, could you tell me a little bit about what you're seeing your team worried about when it comes to adoption of AI? Like what are the biggest risks that people are really starting to pay attention to, or the sort of the concerns that they have as they start to adopt this technology?
Yeah, I mean, I guess as we started to see tool use massively increase, the problems of how we make sure that those tools can be used safely within organizations with the right level of permissions becomes really concerning. You know, MCP gateways solve some of that, but obviously tools can span a lot more things than just MCP, right? We can have APIs, we can have CLIs. And I think it also exposes a lot of the problems with enterprise permissions anyway. You know, there's a tendency within organizations to have far too wide permissions for things generally. So the idea that you're passing on your own personal set of permissions to an LLM to use as it wishes is highly problematic in a lot of scenarios.
And Chaamini, obviously you're seeing a lot of companies and how they adopt AI. Have they got this under control, or are engineers going off and doing it themselves regardless?
Yeah, what I see is like most of the organizations have an app-centric architecture. So when it comes to AI agent, like we have to think in the agentic architecture. So they're not quite ready there. So because everything is designed for a human interaction or like machine to machine. But when it comes to agents, your APIs, as you correctly mentioned, they have to be having the resources that can really enable your agents. Because when you see an agent, there are different touch points. You have the model, and then you have the tooling. So the tooling is the actual, so when you have a successful agent, they have to do something very meaningful for you and cost effectively and performance oriented. So in that tooling space, so you have the MCP server, but what you export through that MCP server has to be designed which can enable the AI agent to, because it's a non-deterministic agentation that we are working on. So that has to be like, there are different iterations that has to happen to get it right. So that's what we are looking at.
And do you feel that that strategy and approach is being applied top down, or is it or bottom up, as in the engineers are deciding to do that themselves?
It's coming mostly from top down, because a lot of organization is pushed to do something with AI, and so it comes from the top down, but then realization has to come from the bottom up. So that's how I'd say it.
And Sal, what are you seeing? What are people concerned about?
Yeah, so right now, what I'm seeing mostly is the calculation of like cost over, right? What's the cost revenue argument? And unless you work exclusively with regulated clients, like I do for my own sanity, they are missing the fact that you also have to divide all of that by risk, right? And some of these early adopters are starting to get fixed up operationally. And I love that, because I'm not paranoid. I just have absolutely zero trust, because it's a security principle. And the organizations that do successfully implement agentic security are in fact fixing one of the biggest operational problems we've ever had in tech, which is the Jekyll and Hyde problem. Previously, you could have a person in your workforce with high level of privilege and access, and one day they might flip and change their mind. Agentic makes that massively apparent to your leadership. And when you get that right, working in a zero trust environment is not unpleasant. It unblocks you from having business ending risks.
So I've obviously spent a lot of time working with CISOs, and a lot of them are very concerned that the CEO and the board are essentially pushing massively for enablement, and that seems to be trumping the potential risks. Do you see? Are you seeing and hearing the same things? Do you think we're prioritizing enablement of AI over the security of it? And what do you think the potential impact of this going wrong could be? I mean, you talked there about potentially bringing down companies. Do you think it's possible, Matt, to bring down?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, we've seen examples of that in the wild already, and I think this. The move from AI coding into more generalized use of AI productivity tools like Cowork and OpenAI just absolutely multiplies that problem, right? Because you're connecting all of these things to all of your enterprise systems, so the potential for disaster is huge.
What type of disasters do you think are possible?
Well, I mean, data leakage for a start is a huge issue, but I think there's also there's a high level of trust that people are putting in the outputs of these things, where they're not necessarily been treated with any kind of rigor up front in terms of creating insights and data about making decisions about your business.
Chaamini, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think data leak is one thing, but I think the tooling side, like what it authorized to do, like going and deleting a database, we have seen, and after it does, you can't reverse it back. So I think those kind of things we need to avoid. That's why the CSOs, like, they won't have the proper governance layer to really see what the agents are doing in your enterprise. So unless that's intact, like, I think there will be a lot of resistance to really get them into production.
Yeah. Has anyone here trusted an agent with their emails? There's one person. Another. Yeah, I mean, I haven't yet, because I've seen that video by that Meta researcher where she's like, no, please stop. No, stop. I told you to stop, as it just deletes her entire email. I work with a company that right now has got an AI desktop, where essentially the AI has its own version of your desktop. And he's trying to convince me to actually log in to LinkedIn and let AI go in, and you can watch it sort of go on the screen, log in as me, doom scroll LinkedIn, look for places to comment, so, to help drive. And I don't trust it to do that. But he was quite willing and did actually sign in with his own LinkedIn account and actually show me how it works. I guess we're going to have to learn how to trust these AI agents. Sal, you talked a bit before about creating a fundamental like zero trust environment. Is there anything new in what we need to think about here when it comes to AI, or is it essentially just fundamentally security that we've always known that just needs to get applied in slightly different ways and perhaps at scale?
Yeah, well, I think removing operational trust is super exciting for me. I don't think you can have a kumbaya security approach. And I really, really like the fact, like when you showed the stack up there, it was almost perfect. Because underneath it, right, there is the kernel. And that is what all of this is operating over. And the one thing I'm very excited about is, yes, Spiffy Spire makes it perfectly easy. And again, your security is also only as good as your audit trail, right? Mm-hmm. Spiffy Spire is going to give you a perfect audit trail, right? But we are at the point right now where we are going to, I'm getting the developers to do this, attach Spiffy Spire OPA policies all the way down to the kernel using no-now, so that you can only have specifically the syscalls for that workload at any given time, which removes about 30% of the vulnerabilities that we are looking at right now. It's a really cool structural approach, and this is going to get really cool in the next year.
I think one of the reasons why Spiffy has not taken off up until this point is it is quite hard to implement, and it's been a real challenge, and it's particularly hard to implement retrospectively. But right now, because we're all building AI agents from the ground up, we have this window of opportunity to do this right. And as you say, Sal, we can build this into the stack from day one, and we can gain so much more confidence. But this is technology that's been tried and tested at scale because it's used, I mean, I'm sure they won't mind me mentioning this, but Uber essentially had a leaked key. It ended up on GitHub, and Uber got hacked, essentially, with this leaked key. And so the board essentially implemented a directive to say that they're going to get rid of secrets in the entire business. And they did it using Spiffy. They were the first organization really to do this at scale, and Spire. But Spire has always been incredibly difficult to implement because of this whole issue that we've seen over the past few years of like these leaked credentials, which has been named the non-human identity problem. So these are non-human identities essentially that end up on the internet. There's been a lot of work over the past 2 to 3 years to actually go and help make Spire, or whatever you need, the framework behind Spiffy to make it easier to deliver. And that's what I was working on at Palo Alto. And we always thought that Spiffy would be very good for AI and AI agents, but we weren't entirely certain whether it would be used for that. And in the past 6 months, as these enterprises have started to pick up their agentic use cases, Spiffy has exploded to the point where now it's referred to as having its Kubernetes moment right now because it's just so perfectly designed for this. But the great news is that the work has been done to make it easy for you to go and consume. It's just do it now with agents because you have an opportunity to go and implement it. That's my Spiffy pitch. Spiffy pitch over. Let me see. So just coming back to the way that you're interacting with customers, Chaamini. You talked about a gateway, and I know that you actually offer a gateway. There's a lot of companies out there that are creating gateways and saying that the gateway is going to solve our problems. Is it going to solve our problems, and what are people going to use a gateway for?
So when we talk about the identity threat model, so there are different layers. So gateway is part of the solution. It's not going to fully solve it, but it will be an answer for certain things, like when it comes to model access, like what data you are doing. So there are guardrails at that stage. Then once you have the data, how you act upon it. So how you access your MCP server. So you have an MCP gateway that governs that as well. So it's kind of multiple levels of guardrails that you have. So as a cohesive system, it will be much more trustworthy. That's what we are trying to do with the gateway story. Yeah.
Interesting. And obviously, the agents aren't very easy to control. So they don't act like humans. Like they could sometimes go a little bit off the rails. How do you think we're going to end up actually protecting what the AI does once it has access to a data source? Has anyone got any thoughts or comments on that?
I mean, I think we're in a kind of transitional period at the minute, right, where we're effectively interacting with systems in the same way that humans interact with them. And there is a world in which probably most of these SaaS-type systems that we use inside businesses kind of cease to exist, and we go into a much more agent-first kind of scenario, which kind of changes the whole way we think about authentication and authorization, right? But I mean, ultimately, what you're talking about is scope control, Matt. You know, and either controlling scopes, you know, via some kind of gateway where you're only passing through the scopes that are actually needed. But I mean, this is what we were talking about earlier on in this session, right? Is that humans have a tendency to have been provisioned with more scopes than they need for a specific activity.
Yeah. So one of the things I do keep hearing from engineers is, oh, it's fine. We've got existing permissions. They're my permissions. I can just go and apply those to an AI agent. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think this is an interesting thing, and I've seen this a lot in misconceptions from people about what the identity piece actually means when you give that to an agent. That the description of, well, it's only got my permissions, right? But I mean, when a human uses those permissions, they make judgment decisions about the way those permissions should be used. And, you know, they do things that aren't likely to get them fired or, you know, aren't likely to destroy the company. When you give your permissions to an agent, you're allowing that LLM to have agency to use those permissions in whatever ways it sees fit. And it doesn't have, you know, the same thought guardrails around what actions it's going to take with those, which is why overscope permissions are so dangerous.
Yeah. Anything to add, Sal?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not a new problem, right? If you know about like Java God class, if somebody lives in a company for 15 years and they move around in different roles and they don't have their permissions taken away, at some point they have complete back-end control of the business, right? And that's a operational risk that most companies and all regulated sectors have to watch. It is very interesting to see a complete like face flip of giving this away to bots, right? And I will say, all the biggest problems in life are object-oriented, shared access to mutable data, right? Like that is the real problem of having like agentic and MCPs hooked up. But, right, you scope it, you have zero trust in your developers because you've got zero trust in the bots, right? And this is where that element of time is so important, right? You will never hit God class because it will only ever function over the domain it's intended to for the duration of the workload, which is very important if that workload is, say, your financial transaction with your bank. This is where this is being implemented now.
That's just reminded me of a point as well that my boss always told me was you should start, if you can, with zero privilege and then build that privilege up over time. So essentially, if you can, figure out ways of keeping the human in the loop to begin with and then learn over time, give that agent more permission. And then as you start to trust the way that the agent works, you can then start essentially enabling more autonomous use cases. But I feel like the market just wants to jump straight to autonomous use cases, which feels a little bit scary to me. But I think if we give people the right paths and we can help them to get there, we can accelerate that process so people can start relying on their autonomous agents. One question that I wanted to ask the panel before we move out to the crowd and maybe get some questions from the audience is open source in the context of AI. And obviously it's foundational to AI, but I'm sad to say I am starting to see a little bit of a reaction now because of the deep insecurities in the supply chain and the concerns with that, to the point where I was contacted by a Palo Alto employee only this week, saying that she's starting to see a lot of CISOs maybe thinking about now forking open source, bringing it on-prem and controlling the supply chain themselves, or perhaps even relying on a third-party vendor. Maybe it could be Red Hat or ChainGuard. And there was a post recently by Dan Lawrence talking about the hardest fork, where essentially we can't trust open source anymore, and therefore we're going to have to think about maybe taking the difficult decision of forking certain projects and bringing them back on-prem. Does anyone have an opinion on this? And do we think it's reasonable to assume that might be something we're going to need to do?
I don't have an opinion that I want to express. that was a gigantic bear trap you just set there.
Sorry, I'm not. It's not too much of a loaded question.
I mean, I think AI-driven development does, in some ways, make you start rethinking the idea of packages, libraries, modules anyway, right? Is there a world in which where the cost of implementation is effectively zero? And so why would an AI in a fully native AI-driven development environment use additional packages or libraries? Why wouldn't you just re-implement everything? Every time? Because those things are really only there as aids for human programmers. I mean, we're not there yet, but I think it's an interesting thought experiment, right?
Chaamini or Sal?
It's a tricky question.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean,
I'll take it. I got opinions on that.
okay, we can all rely on Sal. That's brilliant.
Okay, so I always tell people, I was like, all right, there's many pillars to open source. I care absolutely none about any of them except transparency, right? Like, that is the reason it exists. I want to be able to read the lines of code, right? An agentic system, great. Whatever you want to do with your projects, if you're going to bring them in, try to create an isolated environment, good. But what I think, particularly on this side of the Atlantic, people miss is the fact that, particularly in Kubernetes, you are using the exact same lines of code as are consumed by, let's say, the Missile Defense Agency. The amount of security attention that those projects that are central to the Kubernetes ecosystem receive is unlike anything else. And for you to fork that and give up on having the highest level of security that you do not have to pay for is a very silly business argument.
Good answer. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? Oh, we've got a...
Thank you. So every regulated enterprise I have worked with has an AI security policy now. And it's a Word document about 11 pages long. It has word appropriate about 43 times in it. And eventually an auditor comments, and he doesn't want the Word document. He wants evidence that your agents, your MCPs, don't talk to things they shouldn't be talking to externally. And I know we're centered on identity today, but I wanted a little bit of perspective on network guardrails, which can be more deterministic and more enforceable than teaching a guard dog not to eat steak. Thank you.
Yeah, so policy, regulation, and proof.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's no kind of difference in that between AI-driven applications and non-AI-driven applications, right? I mean, we use things like Zscaler, where we can control the network pathways between things.
Things are a little more dynamic than in the past.
Are they, though? I mean, that's an interesting... in what sense?
Well, you have pretty much any user trying to use... Thank you. Any user could spin up hundreds of agents, like Matt alluded to earlier, hundreds of gremlins, and deploy their own MCPs locally or talk to external MCPs. And the only deterministic thing that we can do about it is probably in the network. And having that external to a non-deterministic, fuzzy agentic system, I feel is important. We have Liz Rice in the audience, who I'm a huge fan of. And the work she's doing on educating people about network guardrails and observability is second to none. I think that should be a huge component to the lethal trifecta, kind of breaking away of the
absolutely.
trifecta.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, as soon as you start trying to empower, I hate this word, but citizen development stuff, vibe codey, whatever, you're going to hit these. You're going to hit these things. So, whether that's kind of protecting blast radius of things, separated environments, all of those things, which we understand already, right? I mean, that's kind of. It's just that it's a much bigger scale potentially.
Sal, you must have an opinion on this, no?
Yeah. If you have a question as to whether or not your business should be implementing AI in any way, why don't you stop, spend a day, and see what your audit trail would look like, right? If that is not up to snuff, you got to start getting that right. Because it's not that it can never fail, it's that you have to be able to acknowledge and have a completely automated record of when it did. But around the compliance thing, last 2 years I've been spending a lot of time around IAPP, and I got all of the certifications for compliance and AI, only because it's like the hardest group of people for me to talk to as a security person, right? Like we live in different universes. And I was talking to, there's always a subset of security people there, and I was talking to someone who's in a pretty big business, and he said, hey, Sal, do you know why we have compliance officers? So we have someone to fire so our security engineers can fix the problem. And I was like, okay, I get it, right? So like that document is just a document. It means absolutely nothing. The auditor wants an audit.
So I would say then, just to finish, maybe you could just give a few words on maybe the skill sets or the resources or the things that people can do that will help them to prepare to secure AI. Sal, do you want to start?
Yeah, well, I think go and check on the auditability of your systems, the auditability of the decision-making of the humans before the implementation of the decisions, which they will ask for. And if you get that right, you're going to be working in a zero-trust style moving forward. And as unpleasant as that sounds, it really is the most hygienic, pleasant way to work. If you get that right, you're good to go. Go have fun.
Thanks. Chaamini?
Yeah, the same thing. Like you get the first governance layer, the auditability, the administration. Like if something goes wrong, you need to be able to stop the agent then and there. So you have to have these different systems in place before you actually talk about the agent identity itself. So that's the way you get started with the agent identity. Yeah.
Thank you. Matt?
Avoid magical thinking. I spend a huge part of my job trying to dissuade people from magical thinking. AI development and running AI applications is no different really to the skill set that we already have, but for some reason it encourages people to make assumptions that are wildly off the mark.
On that note, thank you so much to the panelists, and good luck to everyone on your agent journey.